In this short video clip, we explore what self-directed support means in terms of the support planning process. You might be familiar with the supported person's pathway, which envisions the experience of an individual accessing social care support in Scotland. From the initial point of contact with the social work department, through the assessment of their eligible needs, the undertaking of an outcomes-focused assessment, an individual being informed about their indicative budget which has been allocated to them to meet their support, an individual choosing from the four options which might be available to them. At the heart of self-directed support is how you plan for the support which has been allocated to you. At the heart of self-directed support is the support planning process, how you go about deciding what your support will look like and who will offer that support. The role of the provider in the support planning process is potentially a really significant one. Both the guidance for those who use services and for practitioners at local authority and NHS level suggest that there are 7 key elements in support planning. At the end of a support plan, an individual should be able to answer these critical and key questions. What is important to the individual? What it is that they wish to achieve, the outcomes which they wish to have met? Are there things in their life, things that might not be working so well, which they wish to change? How are they practically going to arrange that support? Is it going to be with one provider or a number of providers? Is it going to be through a personal assistant or different options? How will the allocation of money be spent? How will it be managed? Practically, how an individual will manage their support on a day-to-day basis. And most importantly, how will, throughout all this planning and managing process, will the individual who's being supported stay in charge and in control of the process and feel that they are in control? And lastly, as support planning has a forward dynamic, what do they want to do next? Where do they want to be? How do they want their support to look like? These are the critical elements which all support plans should be able to answer. Once a support plan has been developed, and in a few moments we'll reflect on different models, the support plan is signed off by the local authority or its officers. There are various reasons why a local authority might choose not to sign off a support plan. The primary reason for a support plan being refused is that it does not adequately describe how the assessed outcomes, which have been assessed during an outcomes assessment, are actually going to be met. In other words, it doesn't do its job. It doesn't show how that support will be met. The second main reason why a support plan can be refused by the local authority is that it is in the belief of the local authority might place the individual at risk of harm, or there might be issues of adult protection. The local authority can also refuse the support plan if some of its content suggests that money, which is public money, might be used for an illegal or criminal act, might be used in a manner which is going to fund a service which is already being provided, for instance a healthcare service, or might be using public money in a way which could have that service funded from another means. These are the main reasons why a support plan might be refused by a local authority. It's very important that those who use services and those who provide services are aware, however, that it is not the right of the local authority to make subjective decisions about whether or not somebody's support plan is the best way to meet their needs, but only to use criteria of illegality, of adult protection and risk enablement as the reasons for refusal. Over the years, many practitioners have been working in the area of support planning, many originating in learning disability and children and family services. And in this time, a number of core ideas or principles have been developed, some of which are on your screen now. It's very important that support planning as a process asks the right questions. It's not about asking what the provider needs to know or what the commissioning authority might be interested in, but asking what is important to the person and identifying what the supported person's real needs and desires are. All support planning has a future orientation. It's not about an unhealthy reflection on the past or an over-concentration on present challenge, but looking towards the future and what an individual wants to achieve. Support plans emphasise the strengths and capacities and the abilities and the attributes of an individual. In that sense, they are positive. They are less concerned with negatives, with what an individual can't do or what some of the problems might be, though importantly, those must be considered. But this is about strength and positive capacity. Support planning, such like outcomes-focused assessment, is about universal needs. Yes, it's important to remain healthy and safe and well-nourished and fed, but equally, those who are supported talk about the importance of remaining connected, of having a valued social and community role, of being in touch with family, friends and community. And those universal needs are as important in support planning as basic needs. Support planning is also a collaborative activity. It's not something which can be achieved by somebody going into a room on their own with a piece of paper and writing a support plan. At best, support planning engages and involves others. In fact, an individual should probably not be encouraged to write their own support plan because they are likely to be more self-critical and more self-limiting than if they were in the company of others. Support planning is an opportunity to be creative, to come up with different and alternative solutions to challenges. It's about thinking outside the box, coming up with non-social care solutions to real-life challenges. Like all planning, it's important that the right tools are used and that those who use those tools are skilled in their use. However, we've got to be careful that support planning doesn't become some sort of mystical art. It's a planning process to get a life and to achieve positive outcomes for an individual. The tool is less important than the job it seeks to do. And we've got to be wary of those who become fundamental about using particular models or methods in achieving a support plan. Throughout the whole process, the individual who's being supported is at the centre. They have control. They direct the process. They make the decisions. Risk enablement is very important in self-directed support. And support planning recognises that many who require support in their lives are living in situations where they are prone to risk. We all live with risk. Risk has to be balanced and has to be lived with. And support planning approaches risk in an honest, proportionate and healthy way. Support planning is also resource realistic. This is not kite flying, dreaming. This is about recognising that we have a budget and attempting to identify how we can use that financial resource to achieve for an individual the life that they wish to live. Support planning, therefore, has to explicitly show how the assessed outcomes which have been agreed and identified are going to be met. And lastly, support planning isn't a do-it-once activity, but an ongoing dynamic process which changes each time a support plan is developed for an individual. So all these are key principles which is important when undertaking support planning to be aware of. Providers often know individuals who they are supporting best, and those who are supported often trust and build positive relationships with staff from provider organisations. So provider organisations need to think about how skilled their staff are in becoming involved in the support planning process. And they may need to identify additional training or an additional resource to enable the development of those capacities. There are dozens of support planning models and tools, many of which have been used in learning disability and mental health services, and there are very few which have been used within older people services. The Self-Directed Support Act and guidance offers real potential for there to be the creative development of tools and models which speak to diverse communities and individuals, not least those who are older. Reflecting for a few moments, it might be worth considering some of the common tools used in other services. The first few come from learning disabilities, and many of them originate within Canada and the United States. All of these are often pictographically illustrated by form of graphic facilitation. But here's a simple outline of one which is known as PATH. You'll notice the sense of forward dynamic even in the word PATH. We start off by thinking with an individual about what it is they wish to achieve. If the world was looking good in 2 years' time, their dream, what would it look like? And then we would go back to the beginning and reflect on the now. Who's in my life? What's happening? What's going right and what could be better? And then we jump to 1 year on, imagining this is a 2-year process. And if things were better, if my dream was 1 year down the line of being achieved, what would life look like? Who would be involved in my life? What would things look like? Where would I be? What would my circumstances feel like? And then it's a simple planning process in order to get both to the year and to get to the dream. First of all, who needs to get involved? Who needs to enrol? Who needs to get on board? And this is a process of identifying individuals. What do I need to do in order to get stronger? That might be about financial resources. It might be about making arrangements and doing practical things. And then in the PATH model, the critical next first steps are things which over the next 2 to 3 months I need to do in order to achieve my dream in 2 years' time. And out of those first steps, we get critical actions. You'll see that this is a simple planning tool which involves the individual in bite-sized planning processes. And in that sense, the next one is a very similar model. It's not called PATH, it's called MAP. This is a little bit different. Again, you start with the dream. What is it that you want to achieve in 2 years' time or in 18 months' time? What would life look like? And that, for instance, might be to be living independently in your own home. Your nightmares aren't what keep you awake at night, but are the things which might come and infringe and restrict the realisation of that dream. What are the problems which might get in the way of you achieving that dream of living independently? The Who Am I poster, or the gifts poster, which goes alongside it, is an opportunity to reflect on the individual. It talks about what are my attributes, skills, hobbies, interests. who's involved in my life. It talks about what my giftedness is, a concept which is maybe a little bit strange to those of us in Scotland, but giftedness is the idea of what do I, as an individual, uniquely bring. And then we have, on the left, the story going to the now. Just like the previous model, the now talks about what life is like now. But unlike the previous model, there is an opportunity to reflect on the story of who have I been, what's been my story, how have I got to where I am now. And in this regard, this is a tool that potentially could be very useful for those who are living with dementia and those who maybe are living with negative reputation. But just like the previous tool, it all ends up with action planning in very definite concrete steps of small steps that need to be taken over the next period of time in order to achieve the dream. This third model comes from the organisation InControl and was developed in England and is much used in some parts of Scotland as a support planning tool. You'll remember the 7 questions which we identified as key to self-directed support planning. This tool visually describes the process of a journey to achieving the life identified in a support plan. Underpinning it is a bottom line support, the identification of what support is needed in order to keep me in control and to keep me going. At the start, we identify with what life is like now, what's working and what's not working, what's important to me in my life, what is it that I want to do, where do I want to be, what I want to change. And along that pathway to how I want my life to be are practical steps, action steps, which need to be taken in order to achieve the support planning outcomes. One of the important things about self-directed support is developing tools and models which are appropriate for the individual and for different circumstances. In 2003, Professor Mike Nolan developed the Census Framework in the University of Sheffield as a way of understanding the triangular relationships between the person who might be living with dementia, their carer and social care staff. There is a real possibility that this framework could become a really useful support planning tool for individuals with dementia. A sense of security is the sense of feeling safe and being safe. A sense of belonging is the sense of feeling part of something, having a valued place in the community and in your family. A sense of continuity is people's desire to being linked to their past, to who they have been and to what they have been, to have a role in the present and a relationship in the moment, and to have a contribution and a sense of having a future. A sense of purpose is the importance of, whilst living with dementia, of having a goal to aim for and something to achieve. And a sense of achievement is feeling that you're getting there, that you are actually doing new things and being different in new relationships, that you are somehow, despite everything, getting there. And lastly, a sense of significance is that overarching concern of those with dementia that they matter as individuals, that they're more than their label and more than their illness. All in all, these 6 senses are the fundamental elements which individuals living with dementia may want to see in a support plan. And it's interesting and a challenge for us all to develop support planning tools which meet the needs of the individual and don't just try to fit an individual into pre-existing tools. If we go back to the beginning, we'll remember that support planning is fundamentally about developing a process that helps an individual achieve the outcomes which they have identified as being critical for their life. Support planning is a journey to that achievement. How you get there is very much down to yourself, and in this regard, providers have a real opportunity to contribute and play their part.